illusions ahead. It's only been lonely, I feel so lonely. I decide to rain. The grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear your quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why, so I'll do my true. And I spend 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm under eyes. And I really miss the sunshine. Sunshine, my lucas. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine. Sunshine, my lucas. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Tell me why you tell me why, so I'll do the truth. And I spend 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm alive. You tell me why, so I'll do the truth. And I spend 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. One, two, three. Look into the eyes and shout the end of the world. I would never do love, but I would call it become. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution of love. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. Next time you say don't talk, I say you talk. Because no one's lived my life. I need to compromise my life. And I say that you always talk. But that's sad. Because can't express myself, can't express myself. Because can't express myself, can't express myself. The absolution. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's for you. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. The absolution of life.
Hey there guys, how you doing? Sorry I'm a little bit late here. I'm just having a bit of a late morning, but I wanted to do a little morning thing for y'all. Oh, you can't hear that because I don't have my desktop audio on. How about I turn that on for you and try again? So this is a little good morning wishes to you that Lin-Manuel Miranda uploaded to Twitter a while ago and I had it saved. So I thought I'd bring it down and use it as the opening. So here we go. That doesn't seem to be showing up either. I know what I need to do. Sorry guys, I've had a really, really rough morning. I don't know if you can tell from how things are going so far. Alright, third time's a charm. There we go, now you can hear it.
Good morning.
So good morning everyone. How you doing? I'm not running late because I was trying to set that up. I've just had a very, a challenging morning. I think I'm just running low on energy and other things, but let me go ahead and swap this over a little bit so you can see something more exciting. Oh, there we go. I've updated the kitty videos. Actually, it's kitties and puppies videos for you guys. So this is why it took me so long this morning. Oh, I didn't realize it. See, I don't even have my lighting correct. Try not to get blown out there. All right. Yeah, I redid this video because it was getting a little bit stale. You guys were seeing the same thing over and over. But I didn't upload it to my Google Drive. So this morning I had to process the video and upload it, and then to Google Drive, and then download it back on my desktop because anyway, it's a whole thing. This is my favorite video! This is my favorite video. A dog who stole a Frisbee with a GoPro on it, or something with a GoPro on it. And he's got it perfectly angled so you can watch him do keep away. And I found this video too, which I absolutely love. And so I'm going to turn that input center off. I don't know what that is. I found this video too of the dog running around, and I was like, I have to have that on my show. It's so funny. And it does. It makes me happy. It makes me smile. How are you guys doing, everyone? Christy's supposed to be debating my friend Lewis on feminism. Am I? I know lots of people are asking me to do stuff, and I keep saying, maybe, yeah, I'm really busy right now. I don't remember agreeing to any debates. Certainly. No formal debates. I've got people who want to talk to me, but then again, a lot of, I've had some requests too to do, Gamergate, and I'm like, I don't really know anything about Gamergate. Just because I'm a woman on YouTube and I talk about feminism, it doesn't mean I'm your go-to token person to talk about everything that you want to talk about. I'm supposed to know everything about feminism. And that's not even my area. I'm a political behaviorist. I'm not a feminist theorist. I do try to tell people this. I'm not a feminist theorist. If you want to talk feminist theory, you should go find a feminist theorist, because that's not me. But anyway. Hello, hello, hello. Yes, it is the day to vote in Germany. I don't know how big my German audience is, but I can't imagine anyone who would be on my show who would not, who would watch my show, who'd not vote. But if you are in Germany and you've not yet voted, make sure you please get out and vote today. Hamilton is coming to Australia. Yes, James, I saw the announcement because I'm subscribed to the channel. I don't need this in right now. But yes, it's really exciting. I saw it was between Sydney and Melbourne, right? And Sydney won in the end. They wanted the backdrop of the Sydney skyline or whatever else. But yeah, I've seen Hamilton, and you're so lucky. Go and see it in person. Go see it live. It truly is a phenomenal experience. And to be able to, obviously there will never be something like the New York show in the original cast, but to have it live and to be able to see it, it's really phenomenal. I would highly recommend it. If you have an opportunity, save up the money, go see Hamilton. It is a once in a lifetime experience. Voting is today in Spain as well, European, local, and regional elections, according to people in the chat. So thank you for that update. Sydney won Hamilton, yes. Puppies are adorable, aren't they? It's such a nice way to relax on a Sunday, especially when we have the nightmares of stuff going on around us. And I'm going to be honest, guys, the Carl Benjamin thing has been such a lovely distraction for the last 5 weeks. Why is it as soon as I get on the air, my nose starts to run? Maybe it's all the hot coffee I'm drinking. Anyway, sorry about that, sniffy nose. Yeah, I was saying that since Carl's, election, I've had a nice little bubble to occupy in terms of politics and political news, because when I look outside that bubble, the world looks terrible. Before we start with the regular part of the show, I think it's just worth saying that, I mean, it's pretty clear that we've got a problem with fascists in the United States now, and I did post this on Twitter. Sorry, my mic is spiking a little bit. I'm not very happy with it, so I might throw a filter on there, compression filter, up it a little bit. But the output gains, I think that's where it's going wrong. All right, try bringing down the output gains a little bit. We have the question of when did America slip into fascism? And there's no clear line of when Trump, started being openly fascist. He's always been, in retrospect, fascist. And the constitutional crisis started the moment he got elected. We just didn't realize it yet. Like, that's when the cancer took root. And we didn't realize he was bringing all his criminality with him when he came to the White House. Sorry, we fix this a little bit. And here we go. My hair looks dumb today. And now we're just stuck with basically a fascist and a fascist enabler. We have one opportunity, one shot, one opportunity, as Eminem says in Lose Yourself, to overthrow a proto-fascist or a hidden, his fascism is coming out more and more. He has no regard for the rule of law. He has no regard for Congress. He has no regard for the courts. He is a criminal. And he is being supported and protected by some fascist sympathizers, Republican racists, who are willing to sell out their country to preserve their power and their money. It's like I feel like I should be standing on a soapbox screaming, and maybe that time will come. But at this point, I think what we need to really focus on in order to stop the spread of fascism is we need to focus on increasing the number of people who turn out in the next election. Yeah, as Twisted Hippie said, so much for the warning from history. Let me actually point this. I will share this. Oh, that's a really nice view. I'm going to let you guys keep looking at puppies because it's so much nicer. But there was something that was shared on Twitter earlier today, and it's entirely perfect. And happily, it's subtitled because it's in German, so we don't have to watch it. But first, let's just stay for a moment with the calm puppy and the kitties and the mama who's not dead. If you remember when I had this on with a happy hour, Kevin's like, is he dead? Like, no, it's not dead. The mama is not dead. She's just trying to sleep. Maybe it's the daddy. I don't know. All right. So when I transition from cows playing balls and playing with ball to this, someone tagged me into it this morning, last night. I don't know, at some point, and I saw it today, and it just reminded me so much of where we are right now. That there are people who are willing to defend all kinds of racism, bigotry, hatred, destruction of rights, the removal of rights. I mean, look at what the Trump administration is doing. They're stripping trans people of all the legal protections Obama extended to them. And I don't see people on the right worried about this at all. You know why? Because it's not cis, white, straight dude rights, so they don't care. But this was put out by one of the, I think, ARD or something, a German yada yada station. And it's very spot on in terms of, if you'll recognize this in terms of arguments you've heard from people like Tim Pool and Carl Benjamin, even Seth Andrews, poo-pooed the idea that unless people were wearing uniforms, they were Nazis. Well, here's the new standard.
Nazi.
Can you guys see that all right? I don't know if I can increase the screen at all because the subtitles are rather small. Yeah, that's better. I think you guys can see that a bit easier now. All right. As you saw, the guy in the doorway called the guy in a Nazi suit a Nazi. Nazi-Kühle? I don't know what that first word is in Third Reich.
Haben Sie mich gerade als Nazi beschimpft?
Na, Sie sind doch einer.
Das ist eine Unverschämtheit. Nur weil ich in der NSDAP und in der SS bin, bin ich noch lange kein Nazi. Wahrscheinlich bin ich auch noch rechtsextrem, oder was?
Can you guys see that text? Maybe what I'll do, I'll start it over again. I'll scroll up so you can see the subtitles here. It's really hard. I don't have a podcast for this, so I have no reason to read it out loud to make sure that people who can, are listening can follow along. So you're just going to have to follow along with your eyes here, everybody. Let's start it over again.
Nazi.
Wie bitte? Haben Sie mich gerade als Nazi beschimpft?
Na, Sie sind doch einer.
Das ist eine Unverschämtheit. Nur weil ich in der NSDAP und in der SS bin, bin ich noch lange kein Nazi. Wahrscheinlich bin ich auch noch rechtsextrem, oder was?
Yeah, just because I'm in the SS, you think I'm a Nazi? Do you also think I'm extreme far right? Just because I'm wearing a Nazi uniform?
Was?
Ja, aber was sollen Sie denn sonst sein?
Ich bin vielleicht ein besorgter Bürger, der Angst vor Überfremdung hat.
Maybe I'm just a concerned citizen who's worried about, immigration. Doesn't make me a Nazi.
Aber ich bin nicht rechts.
But I'm
und
not
ich bin
right-wing.
erst recht kein Nazi.
And I'm not a Nazi.
Hey, Sie da? Sehe ich etwa wie ein Nazi aus?
Hey, do I look like a Nazi to you?
Nö, würde ich jetzt nicht sagen.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Na, sehen Sie? Aber der ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch ein
But
Nazi.
he's got to be a Nazi too, right?
Nazis, 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 lauter Nazis. Wenn einem die Argumente ausgehen, dann holt man schnell mal die gute alte Nazi-Keule raus.
Whenever you're running out of arguments, you just play the old Nazi card.
Es hat doch nichts mit Nazi-Keule zu tun.
Sie machen sich das Leben sehr einfach.
Well, it makes life
Nur
very
weil
easy
jemand
for you.
die
Just because someone
Mainstream-Meinung
doesn't
nicht
share your
teilt,
mainstream
ist er
opinions,
gleich ein
they're
Nazi.
automatically a
Aber
Nazi.
Nazi sein ist doch längst Mainstream. Ihr Nationalsozialisten seid an der Macht.
Ach ja, ich vergaß. In Ihrer Welt sind ja alle Nazis. Der Führer ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch ein Nazi, was?
Hitler's a Nazi, right?
Ja?
Jetzt reicht's aber. Führerbeleidigung. Mitkommen.
Das sind jetzt über...
Ja, ich weiß. Nazi-Methoden.
Hey, even people in Nazi uniforms aren't really Nazis, you guys. Come on. You're just being judgmental. I thought that was really, really good because that's kind of, it's so close to what you see being done on the internet with people who are obviously racist. I mean, the Charlottesville types. You can never call anyone a Nazi, even when their opinions agree and coincide with what the Third Reich was all about. So anyway, I thought that was really, really well done myself. I thought it was a point well made in that way. All right, guys, should we have a little look at the chat? Good morning. Like I said, it's been an intense week. I didn't do a show on Friday night, but Kevin and I did do a spontaneous show last night. I've got this show today. I was meant to have my monthly hangout with my patrons, but then it's also the election night, and I wanted to do a live stream to kind of watch some of the results come in and get some early reactions. And that being the case, I would have been on last night, this morning, I will be on this evening, plus a Patreon hangout, plus the Monday night show with Cog and Kevin. I was like, I can't do everything. So I'm going to give my patrons links to the live show. They can come and join me if they want to chat while we wait for the European elections. But it won't be a proper Patreon hangout because I just simply don't have the energy to do 4 shows. Actually, it would have been last night's, this morning, a patron hangout, an election show, and a Monday show. So 5 shows in 3 days. Sorry, guys. I can't. Being in the SS doesn't mean I'm a Nazi. Yeah, exactly. You can't read my mind just because I'm wearing the SS uniform, as James points out. You're assuming I'm a Nazi? Wenn die Deutsche so einfach ist, könnte ich es verstehen. Oh, when German is so easy. Einfach. Yeah, that's wann Deutsch, yeah, so einfach ist, könnte ich es verstehen. Yes. Yeah, that's probably how I would say it too. Literally nobody is a Nazi now. Let me discuss the intellectual pursuits of pan-Germanism. Carl, probably. Nice, yes. I can't really write it. You mean you can't write German? That's fine. The one thing nice about German is it's entirely phonetic in terms of its spelling. I can always sound out a German word whether or not I actually know what it is or not because all the letters are pronounced consistently in German. Have I seen the one with the young Jewish girl in the Nazi invasion? They did it as if she had an Instagram telling her true story in a modern way. No, I've not. If you want to link that, you can go ahead and do it. Arnold World War II episodes. I'm just reading through your comments. Sorry, this is going to be a really boring show. It's going to be very interactive with the chat because Christy is tired and hasn't had enough coffee. Cargon says if he doesn't get elected, he does not get kicked out of UKIP. He wants to stay focused, wants to stay on for the local elections. He is so going to get kicked out of UKIP. He is so going to get, kicked out of UKIP. That's just how it's going to go. All right, 250. Well, have fun at your brother's bloody wedding. There's always you can just watch it back later. It's not that big of a deal. Milkshaking will lead to political violence. All right, so I guess that's the other topic, right? Let's discuss this idea that milkshaking is going to lead to political violence because, let's face it, in the United States, we don't really have that much experience with fighting fascism. We simply don't. It's the case that, I guess you guys couldn't really see the chat. Sorry about that. But if you follow the live chat on the video, you will see what I'm reacting to. Americans have never had to fight fascism on our own soil. We had fascists. We had a lot of people, millions of people actually, who were very pro-Hitler in America before the Second World War. We got engaged with it. There was a good piece someone put out on Captain America on YouTube recently. You guys in the chat remember what that was about? I don't. But it had something to do with like the history of Captain America. I don't know if it was Screen Junkies or someone else. But one of the things that they brought into it was, I don't really need this, the fact that Captain America was, and it was explicitly anti-Nazi propaganda, that they targeted Nazis because of their actions, but then also in a weird way they had really racist things against Japanese people. So the caricatures of Japanese were highly racist, even though the person of Hitler that sort of was at the focus of the Captain America story in the beginning, its raison d'etre, as it were, is himself a racist. So it just shows us that even, within the context, ideas keep progressing. I think that one could perhaps say because Germans were white and the Americans were white, that there was more, they would present Germans as looking human, where they would present Japanese people looking like reptiles and snakes, things like that. So disgusting bigotry, even when they're trying to do the right thing. But I was interested in this piece from, and I hate you have to take the ad blocks off. All right, fine. But then they put on these stupid videos that really take up a lot of sound. I'm going to turn off my desktop audio just in case it goes. But there's this former U.S. Secret Service operative who is, and he's a professional, and he is of the opinion that eggs and milkshakes are not political violence. So now that I've turned off the audio, I actually am quite interested to see what they have for this video, so we might have to sit through an ad, for which I apologize. But, and I said I didn't need my headphones, but actually I do. So let me pop that back in. And let's hit play and see if this is really about the Secret Service dude, or if this is some sort of advertisement.
And is it true? Is it true about the same?
Yes, see that all right? Yep. Is this just people walking around? Is this just the video of him getting egged? Come on. Really? Is it just the egging? There he is. Alright, I guess he doesn't like having his picture. Sorry, we'll watch the milkshaking. Right there, it's coming up right now. You can see the guy approaching. He's at 12 o'clock. Here he goes, and milkshake. Go through some liquid, and now he's going to get arrested. Just got hauled away right around. No, he didn't resist arrest. He cooperated with the police. Complete failure of his security, that's for sure. He's not happy. He's not a happy bunny. He's got to walk around with milkshake dripping down his suit, and now he's embarrassed. But he's not harmed. He's not limping off, anything like that. He's not being rushed to hospital because he's had a bit of milk put down the front of his shirt or his jacket. Right, so, this is written by Tom Embry Dennis. And Tom has the headline, former U.S. Secret Service operative says eggs and milkshake protests are, quote, not political violence, unquote. And then underneath it says, FFS Nigel, Carl, Stephen, you got a whole posse of handlers and factotums. Keep a change of clothes handy and man up. Although, be a man. It's sort of, we get back to that notion of toxic masculinity, right? And stoicism. I'm not opposed to stoicism. I'm just opposed to gendering it in a way to be shaming, because women can also be stoic, and as well as men. All right. So the article reads, a former U.S. Secret Service operative who specialized in protecting politicians from unknown substances has told Nigel Farage to keep a change of clothes handy and man up after the Brexit Party leader was doused in milkshake as part of a growing protest against figures on the right. Dan Kazetsa, who served as senior physical security specialist under President George W. Bush, suggested the rising of milkshaking should be considered a form of protest and not political violence, unless there was evidence it was intended to cause harm. This is interesting, right? Because the far right's position is if you even, accidentally sneeze on someone or whatever, you cross a line into their person, that is violence. And on the other side, we have somebody who is a professional who works in a country where the First Amendment allows for protest, and they have to balance the security of their, this is crazy faces underneath. Sorry, I got really distracted. They have to balance between the First Amendment rights of protest and the security of the politicians. So here, if they're saying eggs and milkshake are protest and not political violence, it really does undermine the claims of the far right that, all of this is just political violence and we have to stop it. Islam activist Tommy Robinson, the article goes on, UKIP candidate Carl Benjamin and Mr. Farage have been repeatedly targeted by people brandishing milkshakes in recent weeks. Well, mostly it's just been Tommy and Carl, to be fair. The mainstream media really only picked it up when Farage got shaked. The trend has led to an increasingly polarized debate as to the limits of legitimate protest and whether throwing soft drinks at divisive political figures could lead to more dangerous tactics in future. A number of politicians have condemned the practice, including Change UK MP Anne Soberry, who called it unacceptable and wrong. Mr. Farage blamed his milkshaking on radical Remainers and politicians who were not accepting the referendum. Others, however, have claimed food throwing has a rich history as a form of protest and has rarely led to more violent forms of demonstration, which is historically accurate. Mr. Kazetsa, I'm going to pronounce his name different every time throughout the article, who advised the White House on how to respond to unknown dangerous substances, said nearly all instances of food throwing should be considered a form of protest rather than violence. So here he is. Regarding the milkshake stuff, some context on where and how I'm qualified to comment. I spent 6 years in the Secret Service as one of its senior CBRN specialists. I don't know if we want to click on the tweet. See what's going to happen now. All at once. Okay, so there's the thread if we want to see it. Nearly all of the time, an egg is an egg, and a milkshake is a milkshake. We in the Secret Service on President Bush in the post-9/11 era didn't consider that stuff to be political violence in the absence of evidence of intent to actually cause harm, he tweeted. We had eggs thrown, we had powder thrown, we had drinks thrown. I had a frappuccino thrown at us in a motorcade. Mostly, this stuff never made the press. George Bush had a valet with a spare suit and a good attitude. FFS, Nigel, Carl, Stephen, you got a whole posse of handlers and factotums. Keep a change of clothes handy and man up. So there you go. What some fail to understand is this is not a binary all or nothing, he goes on to say, black or white thing. There's a whole lot of gray area in the spectrum between completely innocent fun scheisse and actual physical violence. And a milkshake is toward the former and not the latter. On Tuesday, police said they had charged a man with common assault and criminal damage following the dousing of Mr. Farage while on a walkabout in Newcastle city centre. Farage's suit was left covered in the drink after incidents about 1 p.m., yada, yada, yada. All right, so obviously this is, like I said, Americans, we don't really have, we haven't fought fascism before. And we also know that Americans, it was the comment made by MLK as regards the white moderate, that white moderates really suck in terms of tolerating any kind of disruption to their lives in order to remedy an injustice. They're quite happy to allow people to be discriminated against and for segregation to happen implicitly or explicitly, for their police brutality done on other people. But the moment that you block the street so that they're 5 minutes delayed to work, oh my gosh, this is unacceptable. This will not stand. Right, so that's the kind of, and we have it, the nonviolent protests. I think people want to sort of romanticize them as if everyone supported the use of nonviolent tactics. And even those were criticized by whites who didn't want to see any meaningful change, or who wanted change to happen but not in any way that disrupted their lives. Right. This is, and we've never faced like fascists, never faced people who wanted to properly dismantle our government. You could say, I probably could make an argument from American history that there was a real attack on civil liberties and freedom of thought during the Red Scare during the 1950s. And people's rights, freedom of association, freedom of thought, freedom of speech were undermined by an official government inquiry that attempted to demonize anyone even associated with the ideas around Marxism and communism. This, to me, is a little different. This isn't the government targeting people and abusing its power to harness, to rope in or to control the thoughts of certain citizens. We have people in government. We have Republicans in the Senate, in the House, in the White House, and in the Trump administration who are not interested in democracy. They're interested in wealth and concentrating power in the hands of racist white guys, white supremacists, who are want to maintain a certain level of oligarchy. That there's a little bit of room for some people to get ahead to push the myth that America is a land of opportunity. But ultimately, they want to keep power in the hands of evangelical, white, cis, straight men, and to continue their transphobic, homophobic, anti-woman. We see the attacks on women happening. This is part and parcel of fascism. This attempt to treat women, was it Alabama that made it illegal to go and get a legal medical procedure in another state? They would, if you cross the border to get an abortion legally in another state, you would commit a crime in Alabama. Women aren't people anymore. They're the property of the state of Alabama. That is drifting toward fascism. They don't see women as human beings. They see women as baby incubators. And they write laws that turn women into those things. Right? And so that is a challenge we're facing. And it's very important for the far right to make sure that once they gain power using democratic means, that they then pull up the ladder underneath them. This is why the people who opposed the second referendum, the Leavers, are so angry and so frightened at the idea of democratic legitimacy happening again, right? Because they use the democratic process to harness its legitimacy to justify their withdrawal from the EU. But then when you go and say to them, well, now that we know what the actual deal is, now that you can see what the implications would be for people, let's have another vote so people can ratify that decision. Oh, no. No, we have to go back. We can only make a decision once, and it's when we made the decision that I agreed with. We can never go back and look for, the voters have changed their mind. Too bad. Tough luck. We're going to proceed on with this thing because if we take it to the people again, I will lose, is what they're thinking. And they know they're going to lose. Remain is winning in the polls. So it's really super important to fascists to use the democratic process to gain legitimacy and then find ways of undermining the democratic process to preserve their power under the guise of legitimacy. So this guy, I've got off of the milkshake thing, for which I apologize. But I think it's important that we understand that the objection, calling milkshaking, calling egg throwing, even with water, some harmless liquid, calling it political violence is the way the fascists stop you from resisting. Because if they make everything except talking political violence, then when they turn the cameras off, as Tommy Robinson told his thugs, once the cameras are off, yeah, use violence. Of course, knock them in the head. But then just deny it. And when the cameras come back on, just pretend like we're always about speech. And so how do you resist fascism? How do we as Americans resist fascism. This is a conversation we're going to have. But in the UK, when you've got people who are outside of the mainstream, and let's talk about how it went first, right? Tommy Robinson was spontaneously milkshaked. Should I switch videos here just so you can watch some nice, relaxing kitties and puppies and stuff? Oh, that's a nicer view, isn't it? So if I need to come back to the Secret Service guy, the guy Tommy had pulled into a conversation had kind of surrounded him with his thugs, and at that point the guy acted spontaneously. He just chucked his drink because he was so frustrated and he wanted to get away, and Tommy was being a jerk and he just acted spontaneously. After that he was milkshaked because he's a blatant racist. He's a horrible he's a thug. He's a violent criminal thug with a criminal record. And I understand people go to prison and they can reform. Tommy is not reformed. Tommy is still using violence to try to achieve political ends. He's just doing it in a very smart fascist way, which is to do it off camera, to do it in ways that he thinks he has plausible deniability. Right? And when it comes to Carl, as I said in last night's show, I blame UKIP for part of the result of the milkshaking. When you put out a candidate who offends so many people on such a visceral level, when you stand behind a man who is defending the use of rape to demean women in public life, which is not part of the, does not promote good democratic dialogue, then, and you stand, and the party leader stands next to him and defends him and will not take him off the ticket, people aren't going to go and have a civil conversation with someone they have contempt for. And they want to, I can understand the frustration of expressing their displeasure. This is beyond the pale, and the milkshaking and dumping horse manure in front of him is that way of expressing that frustration, because Carl has a mic, he's got a platform, he's got a candidacy, he's walking around, and to demonstrate their disapproval when they grab the mic, he's just going to talk over them, right? He's going to monetize their objections to feed his racist, bigoted base. But humiliating him, putting milkshake on him, doesn't do harm. Really doesn't. It doesn't harm him. And it embarrasses him. That's really what it comes down to, is fascists don't want to have their prides wounded. And that's why, and someone said, 250 says that Farage didn't react to his milkshaking. Carl also seemed to take it in stride. I think Tommy's people started thumping. I think Carl's handlers also started being physically violent too, because they see that as provocation. But so when this whole thing started, I didn't know how I felt. I tend to come from, my instinct is that naive Americanism, which is like, ooh, free speech, First Amendment, you can say almost anything you want. If you're talking about deporting people, killing people, destroying people's lives, denying them their humanity, that is a call to violence. It's not it's an incitement to violence, but it's promoting it. And especially now that I've read more people about the use of milkshakes, and it reminds me of the line between, not law breaking, and civil disobedience. So I've now firmly put milkshaking, as long as it's only milk and maybe some sugar, chocolate, whatever. But if you're just dumping a drink on someone and they're like, oh, slippery slope, Christy, people are going to milkshake you. Yeah, if they're willing to get arrested for it, or, because if you're going to do that and say, people wanted the Carls, people arrested. If someone's willing to do that, I'll go get a towel and, take a shower. That's fine. I've not been hurt. And, my speech hasn't been ended either. You've just been publicly humiliated. So I'm definitely going to put myself, I've decided, I thought about this for a long time. I wasn't sure if milkshaking was an acceptable form of protest now, or if it was violence, or if it was somehow, in that way tending toward. And I've definitely made up my mind that it's more in the civil disobedience, like chaining yourself to trees so that the timber companies can't, have to delay cutting down some, valuable forest land, or trespassing onto a nuclear plant to demonstrate the lack of security, or protest protest nuclear energy in favor of a green agenda, whatever it is. There are areas where we cross lines deliberately as a form of political protest to make a point. And after a lot of consideration and thought, and also the consulting, experts looking at the guy who's got multiple years of experience with the Secret Service, I have come down on the side of milkshaking being a form of protest, not a form of political violence. All right, so what do you guys in the chat think? Why would it stop being milkshakes? Because milkshakes are non-lethal and they don't harm people. If your purpose is to embarrass your political target instead of harm them, then milkshaking is why you would stop. It's because that's as far as you want to go. The whole slippery slope argument didn't work here. We didn't go from milkshakes to bricks, did we, in the UK? We had 3 people who were all far right, all associated with incredibly racist views and policies, people publicly humiliated by milkshakes. And it didn't get into acid, and it didn't get into bricks. So I don't think that the slippery slope logical fallacy is a good argument generally, and I don't think it's a good one here. I avow all attempts to fish milkshake and horseshit Carl. Good for you, Niall. I have no problem with the use of greater force to stop fascists. Depends on how hot it is. I mean, outside it's hot, because clearly milkshakes are going to be cool. Otherwise the milk would curdle. If it's enough to burn someone's skin, then no. Well, no one's saying doing hot milkshakes or hot cocoa. I don't know if you are familiar, Judgment, with how milkshakes work in the UK. They're literally just cold milk with flavoring in them. So no, nothing hot. V isn't a person, though. V is something else. Yeah, I was kind of dragging V on Twitter today because he deserved it. I don't know, V is all kinds of needy these days. He is all kinds of pay attention to me on Twitter. I don't know if Carl's, campaign going up in flames has had V feeling a little emotionally insecure. But I think I've talked about this openly many times. This is going to be a boring ass show, you guys. I've got almost nothing prepared. It's such a casual talk. Sorry. But I've been open with the fact that, V reached out and messaged to me probably over a year ago now. And at first I just rebuffed him, but he kept not rebuffed him. I was a bitch. I was really not very nice in terms of I was very standoffish and shut off. But we talked and kind of broke down some barriers. We sorted some things out with him taking down the video about Heather's murder and him actually showing remorse for it. So V is kind of like a complicated person to me. Kevin tends to put V in more like he's just Sargon's carrier pigeon. But the fact is that V has been staying away from the drama. I'm going to be honest. V's mostly been staying away from showing up on other people's channels to stand for Carl, at least as far as I've seen, for a while. He doesn't do it like he used to. And he talks about drama on his channel, but he doesn't kind of provoke harassment or those types of behaviors that we've seen in the past on YouTube. And that's not to say V has good views. I'm just saying that V isn't as simplistic as I think Kevin kind of views him as. But, and for a long time, we would go back and forth, maybe a couple, spar once or twice a day just in DMs, or, go a couple days with nothing and then have a 5-minute back and forth. But since the campaign, the other thing I should say is I try not to bring up Sargon with him. And he doesn't really tend to bring up Sargon with me because obviously we fight over Carl. We cannot find a common ground over Carl. So our conversations have been about pretty much everything except Carl. And I've tried to bring up in our conversations oh my God, Sargon is being embarrassed in this way, or Carl is saying this stuff, because it's not V's job. I'm trying to say it's not V's job to stand for Carl. And if I want to get him out of that, and treat him as a person with his own views, I can't keep asking him to defend his friend. I wouldn't want someone to come at me with every single quote from Kevin being well, Kevin said this and Kevin said that. I'm but I'm not Kevin. So I try to talk to V, not about, I'm not trying to talk via V to Sargon. But during the campaign, I could not talk about him. How could I not talk about Carl for the last 5 weeks? So I pretty much just not DM'd V at all. I can't not talk about Carl, and so I've just not talked about him. And he has sort of popped up into my mentions instead. He's like not doing DMs anymore, and he's coming at me in my mentions and my responses. But he's been engaging a lot with people on our side, and I'm wondering if he's emotionally a little insecure with Carl's going down, or maybe V is starting to question some of his views, and he wants to fight with people because he wants to try to reinforce them. What is the nature of my relationship with V? Would I call him a friend? No, I don't call him a friend. Frenemy? That is too I think it was V wanted to make a sincere effort. I did believe this, to have conversations outside of his bubble. The problem is that when he gets someone from outside of his bubble to have a conversation, he just has the conversation inside of his bubble, and he uses logical fallacies, and he uses bad information, and he throws things out there, and he makes claims that are usually based on anecdotal evidence. And when you push back and counter, he doesn't have a good standard of understanding how evidence works. So but on the other hand, he's weirdly willing to take on criticism. Like, one of the first interactions we had was he said something about feminists who oppose, like the deconstruction of gender or whatever, and I had to correct him on the difference between like radical feminism and other types of feminism. Radical feminism wants to undermine the concept of gender. And I think there's some merit to the complete, deconstruction of gender and gender norms and roles in a society, because they're all arbitrary. Some are biologically linked, but none of them are necessary. And he took that, criticism on. So he's this weird mix of, sometimes he's open to new information, and other times he just repeats the party line to the point you're like, I don't even, this is wrong, right? So that's, it's complicated. I don't know. I certainly, if I was having a bad time, V would not be the person I would talk to. He wouldn't be the first person I would turn to for like emotional support or anything. But if I wanted an edgelord's take on something, he might be a person I would turn to. All right. So what else have you guys have going on here? Carl shielded the Christchurch shooter. Yeah. And Carl's a dirtbag. And we all know this. He actually was going to do a video on the manifesto of the shooter because he claimed the shooter had made some pretty valid points. But that never happened. Oh, I love this video. I love that plop. That's so great. If we do nothing, the far right will gain more power. The more power they gain, the more LGBT plus and POC people will die. Exactly. Yeah. And it's always, fascists will use your moral core against you. This is one of the other things that makes them awful. Carl will not, for instance, adhere to moral norms, but he will try to shame you if you act like him. They always try to force us to constrain our actions by holding us to standards that we hold ourselves, but they will not hold themselves to. And so I think, finding ways that are morally consistent, like nonviolence, but also standing up to fascism, milkshaking in the Venn diagram, that hits that sweet spot. I'm becoming increasingly okay with those things because I'm seeing the violence that fascists are doing every single day in the U.S. Congress and in the Trump administration to LGBT people, to people of color in our community, in the United States. So yeah, of course we have to stand up to fascists. And you can't just do it by being polite, because they won't be. They will lie and cheat and steal, and they will use violence, and they will abuse power. So if you play by the rules, you're going to lose against a fascist. Let's see, what are people saying? Milkshakes don't make martyrs, they make laughingstocks. Yeah, good point, Natalie. Well said. I meant violence like punching. I don't know what you're talking. I feel people need to ignore the radicals on both sides and come together. Yeah, Jay, but the thing is, you can't come together with people who want to eradicate you from the earth. You can't compromise with people who want to see you destroyed in your life, and want your very existence to be made illegal. There's no coming together for that. That's either you pick the side of human rights or you pick the side of oppression. 250, do I know how Garrick and Bashir would have done? I have no idea who those people are, sorry. I'm going to skip that one. You don't need to punch someone to end a fight, that's true. No, but when people no longer talk, violence is inevitable, right? But if the talking is not about, if you talk to someone who doesn't recognize your humanity and only wants to destroy you, who wants to pass laws that end protections like trans people getting thrown out of the military, trans people having medical protections, that's not talking. You can't talk someone into respecting your human dignity. You can only take away the power they have to deny you your human rights. And you do it in the ballot box. But when they corrupt the ballot box to such a point where the ballot box is just a cover because it's only white racists who vote Republican who can vote anymore, which is what the GOP are aiming for in the United States, then that is the elimination of human rights under the guise of democracy. And you can't, so Jay, you're assuming that when you're talking to a fascist or crypto-fascist or somebody who has sympathies with fascism, that they acknowledge your human rights the way you acknowledge theirs. And they don't. That's what you have to get your mind around. That people like Carl don't acknowledge the human rights of trans people. And how do you have a conversation with someone? You can't. You have to work to oppose their power. That's the only course of effective action. Because the longer you talk to them, the more they get their agenda done, denying people their rights and their humanity while you're talking. So you have to find other ways of resisting them. It's funny how fascists are an exception to the use of actual violence. They manage to bring down to the standard of a simple milkshake can be talked about as violence. Again, this is a fascist tactic. This is what they do. They want to deny you your free speech, deny you your use of protest and everything else. And then when the cameras are turned off, they want to use violence and intimidation. They want to, ally with the oligarchs funding their projects in order to preserve the power of an elite few rich white cis guys, like the Koch brothers and other people who are supporting the GOP. Now, I don't want to say hashtag not all Republicans, but too many Republicans, about 2/3 of the party, really. There's about 1/3 of constitutional Republicans, former Republicans, who understand the threat that Trump poses. But there's a lot of people who are Christians first and Americans second in America. And if you're a Christian first, that means that you're more concerned with achieving God's agenda than in protecting people's constitutional rights that you disagree with. So don't assume your interlocutors share your value system. That's the problem with centrism. I never saw Deep Space Nine. No, kind of like I was at university and didn't get into it, I think, when it was on. So I missed Deep Space Nine, although I did watch Next Generation. All right, guys. It's 10:02. My coffee is cold. I need a warm up. I thought in the second hour we could have... I love this video. Sorry, I love so many of these videos. Thought we could watch a PragerU video in the second hour because I got nothing. I'm just running on empty at this point. Burp, says James. So should we all go and get our get our coffee on? Be like this little puppy here. Go get our coffee on or a tea on. Maybe it's time for wine for you, depending on what time it is. I'm going to wait till at least 2 o'clock for wine. And, woo, more PragerU. Yeah, it's so easy to dunk on them, so why not? All right, it is currently 12:53. Let's take 7 minutes and be back at the top of the hour, you guys. See ya then.
It's only been long as I feel my head is set to fade away. I hear you quite slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why, so I'll do my true. And I spent 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm under lies. And I really miss the sunshine. Sunshine, my lord. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, sunshine, my lord. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Tell me why you tell me why, so I'll tell the truth. And I spent 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm alive. You tell me why, so I'll tell the truth. And I spent 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. One, two, three. Look into the eyes and show the end of the world. I would never do love, but I would call it vegan. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution of love. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. Next time you say don't talk, I say you talk. Because no one's lived my life. I need to compromise my life. And I say that you always saw my bad side. Because can't express myself, can't express myself. Because can't express myself, can't express myself. The absolution. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. The absolution of love. The absolution of love. The absolution of love. The absolution of love. Absolution of love.
Well, hey there, guys. How you doing? I hope you had a nice break and enjoyed some of the adorable animals. I have to say, when I go and make my coffee, I'm standing in the kitchen. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat, so I take my tablet with me, and I'm watching my live stream right as I'm making my coffee and checking out the chat. And Yeah, I don't know if you guys watch these videos at all, but I enjoy them a lot. Apparently I've got this one a couple times, so I'll have to fix that in the next one. But anyway, I saw you guys were having a conversation about talking to people who have fascist sympathies in the chat, and obviously, there's the dilemma of, as Jay was pointing out, I'll try to represent Jay's point consistently. Oh, I love this video. Hold on, my feet are really cold, my toes are really cold, I need to put some socks on, so hold on a second. I have these awesome massive fuzzy socky things with like floor grabby plastics on the bottom because my feet are so cold so often. But Jay was saying, you can't, if you're throwing milkshakes at people won't change their mind. I think that's the point. And other people were countering with the idea that, well, you can't, if somebody is in a mental place where they aren't willing to have their mind changed, then talking to them isn't going to do anything. And both of those things are true. These are not mutually exclusive. But I think that there's also a question of the time and place. And when Nazis are out marching around, when fascists are out promoting their hate agenda, then that is, when they are making a public display, they're not going to be in a position in a mental place to like, oh yeah, maybe my entire worldview is wrong. I think in that case, if they're out there protesting, you need to do a counter protest of demonstrating that that's not acceptable. And obviously in the US there's a little bit of a difference. I think people in Britain just have a longer tradition of throwing food, maybe. We used to do that back in colonial times with the stocks and stuff. People would be encouraged, actually. The Puritans encouraged small kids to throw food and rotten things at people who were put in the stockades because they considered it a moral learning moment. So we do have this tradition of using food in the States. We just don't tend to draw on it very often. And I just think too in UK politics, they are more accustomed or more tolerant of seeing their politicians humiliated. So they don't, they're not too precious about something like a milkshake. I think obviously if you look at the polling, most of the British public are against it, but I don't think they consider it, like a criminal offense. Anyway, we are going to dunk on a little bit of PragerU. That was the plan. So let's stick with the plan. Let's see. Let's just see what a couple more people have had to say. I adore Pomeranians, but they hate me. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that, James. 250. I tried to go for a crap, but apparently I'm constipated. Well, I would say drink more coffee. Just slam coffee. Or, another option would be something with Tabasco sauce in it. You want to try that? Waiting for the best is wanting the best for as many people, usually in the UK, is defined by... Oh, there's another conversation. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat here, which you guys can't see. Why don't I also show you the chat? I know that the puppies are cute, but I guess you want to see what I'm reacting to. Milkshaking is primarily for the fasci leaders. They won't have their minds changed, but at least we can humiliate them. I would also say that that is appropriate. That would be kind of my tactic as well. It's not like your random... skinhead you're just going to dump milkshake on. Carl was out as a candidate defending the idea that rape is an acceptable way to talk about women in politics, in the political discourse, and people were disgusted. And so they were demonstrating that by humiliating him. The first milkshaking was some guy defending himself against Tommy Robinson. Yeah, I think, what happened was Tommy had pulled him in for a conversation and was sort of had him surrounded, the guy that he pulled into the conversation, who was of, I don't know if it was like Indian or Pakistani or Afghan. I don't know what his descent was, but he was not sort of from, the Caucasians. And Tommy had pulled him in. There was a big crowd around him, and he was sort of telling him things, and the guy couldn't get away and just got so fed up, spontaneously just splashed up the milkshake he was carrying, and it got all over him. And that humiliation inspired other people, and that's where it started. What is PragerU? PragerU is it's a propagandist. It's a conservative propaganda outlet that misuses the idea of misuses the letter U to give itself credibility it doesn't deserve. So PragerU is merely it's a right-wing propaganda outlet. It's funded by conservative Christian outfits, and its agenda is to preserve white, well, especially white, but Christian power in the United States. Yeah, so it's basically like an arm of a church, and its idea is to promote agendas that, stop progress from happening socially. So that's what PragerU is. Speaking of which, I guess we should look at one of their videos, huh? All right, just gonna check the chat one more time to see if you guys have anything. It's a pretend university. It's not even a university. I mean, they don't offer. I mean, I'm not trying to drag you, James. But you're right. They're trying to pretend they're a university, and they bring in people who have titles, and they pay them a lot of money, I'd assume, to say things that they agree with, but aren't necessary. But they don't do good research. They just give opinions. Well, so someone's thinking that Prager is Jewish. I don't know. Fundamentalists, though, I saw that Rushvi has now become a religious fundamentalist, and it hasn't changed his views really at all. He still hates women. He still thinks men are, genetically or whatever superior. He's just now anti-sex instead of being like, sleep with everyone you want. So fundamentalists generally, they have a lot of agreement. We're gonna look at the 5-minute videos list because those are easy to get through. And I decided this time, why are you, what's popping up? I don't know what that is. Okay. Let's go ahead, and I've picked one, Who Are the Racists? Because I figured this would be completely insane. And we're going to go ahead and have a look at it. Now, I've got my desktop audio turned way down, so I'm going to turn that up a little bit and have a listen here to see how it goes. So if anyone has comments in the chat, I will try to put you over here so I can see you as well as the Prager nonsense. You guys can have your reactions as well. Yeah, that seems to work out. All right, like my screen obviously is blocking the chat for you guys, but I can just pull it up. I can read it. That's all that really matters. So, all right, guys, let's see. Who are the real racists? Is that the name of the video? I can't even be bothered to see the correct name on it. All right.
Every single day, someone of prominence on the left, a politician, a cable news host, an entertainment figure, accuses someone on the right of being a racist.
Can we just start off with the fact that Prager builds all of its videos on logical fallacy foundations? So you could say this is like a hasty generalization fallacy or something, but the fact is that they're not here demonstrating with clips or tweets from famous people on the left of calling someone a racist. They just claim it's happening, and they ask you to believe them. I think that's highly questionable. If I were going to be doing this video and saying every single day on the right, someone says something dehumanizing about people on the left, I would come with a bunch of Fox clips. I would look at Ben Shapiro clips. I would pull up Milo Yiannopoulos clips. I would pull up Carl Benjamin. I mean, I could just really easily demonstrate empirically with examples of them doing this. But what PragerU does, of course, is just smear people, and then they don't substantiate it. And this is just a typical tactic from them. So it's not a surprise, but I'm just pointing it out because this is what they do. They lie about people.
Here are typical examples. MSNBC host Chris Matthews said this.
We get some examples.
The age of Jim Crow managed to find a new habitat in the 21st century Republican Party.
That's not calling somebody racist. That's just empirically accurate. Look at what they're doing with voting rights. Look at the way that they're expanding the restriction of access to the polls across the country in Republican states like my home state of Wisconsin. So that's actually not an example. What he said, calling people racist. So let's see if Chris goes on to actually call someone racist.
Comedian Seth
No, there was no word of racism. Where was the word racist? Let's go back and see exactly what he says people on the left are doing.
News host, an entertainment figure, accuses someone on the right of being a racist.
of being a racist. Being a racist. Now, someone means a person, and you're calling a person racist. So the first example with Chris Matthews was not of him calling anybody racist. It wasn't. It was pointing out the expansion of Jim Crow laws that formerly Democrats, now and then they switched parties to be Republicans, passed in the South, and now they're spreading it all across America. That's not calling somebody a racist. This is how Prager lies. They tell you that they're going to tell you one thing, and then they show you something else, and they expect that you're not smart enough to catch that they've just pulled a bait and switch on you. And that's precisely what they did.
Here are typical examples. MSNBC host Chris Matthews said this: "The age of Jim Crow managed to find a new habitat in the 21st century Republican
we already
Party."
said that's not calling somebody
Comedian
a racist.
Seth Meyers told his
So let's see what the
late-night
second
audience
is.
that Republicans traffic in open racism.
Again, this is not calling a person a racist. It's saying that Republicans traffic in open racism, and then you can show examples of them doing it. Right, like the Pennsylvania Republican dude who said that the voter suppression laws that they were passing were going to help get Trump elected. Right? Because they're targeting people of color. I mean, it's not that difficult to find examples of Republicans trafficking in racism. But that's not the same thing. That's still not calling a person a racist. So Prager is lying to you. It's deceiving you right now. Its two examples are actually not examples of what they said happens.
Tennessee State Representative London Lamar.
All right, is someone actually going to call someone a racist now? Are we actually going to see an example where some random Tennessee State representative calls somebody a racist? Please? Can we actually see an example of someone on the left calling someone on the right a racist? We haven't seen one yet.
A black woman, announced that the entire state of Tennessee is racist, period.
Okay. All right, that's still not an example of someone on the left calling someone on the right racist. So my hair is going crazy because I'm playing with it because in reaction. But there's not a single example of actually one person on the left calling somebody on the right a racist. And you know why that is? I'm just gonna hazard a guess. Is if you look at when people on the left call what people on the right do or say racist, and then you look at what the people on the right are doing or saying, it's probably racist. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that they're calling out racism when they say someone is being racist. Okay, if the structure of the power in politics and the justice system, and in education and environmental health and all other kinds of things in Tennessee are structured in such a way that people who are most disadvantaged are non-whites, then the state of Tennessee has racist practices. And I know it's upsetting for conservatives to hear that they are racists when they do racist things. But the fact is that if Tennessee has racist policies, then yeah, Tennessee is racist. Can we just see the Tennessee flag? See if there's a Confederate flag in the Tennessee flag? Oh, happily it's not. That I can see, which is, whew, at least they don't have the damn Confederate flag in their flag. So that's good. All right, let's, well, calling a state doesn't, so James is saying the person called a whole state racist. That is not calling the individuals of that state racist. That's not like saying every person in Tennessee is racist. That's not the same. Talking about a state being racist under segregation is different. Institutionally racist, exactly. It doesn't mean every single person who lives there is racist. And that is, again, a distinguish that racists don't want you to make. They want to not distinguish between institutional, structural racism and individual level bigotry. Right? And this is another thing, too, that I think there's a problem with white people. We got to talk about white people. When you say you're not racist, or you don't consider yourself a racist, what does that mean exactly? Because to not be racist and still hold prejudiced views and still be bigoted, you're not technically out of the racism Venn diagram yet. You still got a ways to go. And if you're not anti-racism, are you allowing racism to exist passively? And in that case, can you really deny that you are, racist insofar as you are not doing anything to resist racism, which you claim you oppose? So saying you personally, oh, look, I'm not a racist, but I'm not going to do anything. So you're willing to tolerate racism. You just don't want to, personally, say anything, but it doesn't bother you that much. Right? And that's why I think that there's this sort of this problem in the white community with white people in America who say, I'm not racist, therefore I'm a good person. No, that's not enough to be an ally. That's not enough to be a fixer. It's not enough to be a part of the solution. You personally not expressing your, opinions either way, you're holding up the status quo. Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent. So let's press play.
This was just after she was elected in Tennessee.
Yeah. So exactly. Someone in the chat. Who's that? Oh wow. Degar. I can't even say that. Sorry. Is that Welsh? I can't say what your last name is. She lives in Tennessee, therefore self-owned racist. Yeah, exactly. This is it. They think that they've just made a point. Oh, she's from Tennessee, so she just called herself racist. And I know you're misrepresenting and misunderstanding her point. You're being intellectually dishonest. That doesn't give you a point in your favor. It just shows you can't basically present the best argument of your opponent. You have to hide behind straw men. And this is entirely Prager's strategy. They promote lies, they refuse to provide sources, and they straw man people because they can't be intellectually honest, because their position isn't sustainable if they're intellectually honest.
The left calling the right racist isn't new. It's been going on for decades.
Because they've been racists since segregation and the Ku Klux Klan and all of the Americans who had fascist sympathies in the 1930s, who were pro-Hitler. Yeah, we don't really talk about that in American history, do we? All of the sorry, I'm gonna my bra strap slid down. We don't talk about all of the pro-Hitler Americans that were rallying in the United States before the Second World War. Oh no, we don't want to talk about that. There have always been racists in power in America because since the founding of our country, we've had racists representing us and creating the laws. And that's never changed. That's never changed. Just because slavery was made illegal doesn't mean we stopped having racism in our institutions. So, the left is always called the right racist. Back when it was, Republicans who were promoting abolition and the Dixiecrats who were resisting it. Then the Republicans were the left and the Democrat, and the Republicans were the left and the Democrat were right, and then they switched, as you guys know. But yeah, the left will continue to call out the right for its racism. Hopefully, unless you silence us.
Republican Presidents Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, his son George W. Bush, were all accused of being racist.
Because they were, oh my gosh! Are you serious? Are you serious? Oh my God, I can't even believe they're defending Nixon. Are you out of your minds? They're trying to defend Nixon? Okay, let's just look at some of his comments. I can't even type. I'm so flustered at this lie. All right. Nixon, the racial slur in me, the shocking story behind his war on drugs. These are the most racist precedents. So we got Thomas Jefferson up there. That's fair enough. Andrew Jackson. Oh, we got a lot of the founders, obviously, because they must be going in chronological order. They're going because that's people, slave owners, and the friends of slave owners. So let's come down to Eisenhower. Yep. Johnson, even though he could still be a racist. There we go. Richard Nixon. I don't know what this picture is. Richard routinely referred to black Americans as Negro bastards who live like dogs. Right? Nixon advisor later admitted that the administration took up the war on drugs to target the anti-war left and black people. So that is not racist. Calling people Negro bastards who live like dogs, to that guy, not racist. I don't know how you could call that not racist. That's racist. Nixon was racist. Here's his other hero, Ronald Reagan. What did he do? According to Newsweek, Ronald Reagan painted black women as welfare queens. During his 1976 presidential campaign, Reagan described a woman ultimately dubbed the welfare queen. Reagan's infamous story was based on a tale of a real person from Chicago, but he racialized the debate over welfare in the United States. That continues to impact public perception as well as policy regarding welfare. Yes, Ronald Reagan spread racism. Yep, he did. He was a racist and helped it. And I don't have any examples here, so let's just say George Bush, racism. I'm less familiar with any, oh yeah, the Willie Horton ad, of course. Holy cow, the Willie Horton ad. This was massively racist. This was basically associating black people with crime and trying to basically say the Democrat who was running had let out a guy, under a certain program, and they used pictures of a black man to terrorize white voters into saying, oh, it's dog whistle politics, as is pointed out. So, yeah, George Herbert Walker Bush used racism to win his election. That's racist. And George W. Bush, yeah, that's the one, sadly, that we want. Racist. Just to see what comes up. Oh, wrong one. W. Bush. Doesn't want to give me W's. But, so, Alexa's being set off now. So anyway, I'm happy for you guys in the chat to look. I didn't plan on having to fact check everything in here. Why did George W. Bush die? Oh, okay. This is Herbert Walker Bush and Bush Jr. Anyway, I'm not going to fact. We managed 3 out of the 4. All right, we'll put a question mark. But let's just say their track record of saying that these men weren't racist, when one called black people dogs, the other one invented an entire racist trope that has continued down for decades to harm people's lives. The guy who used the Willie Horton dog whistle ad to win the presidency. If these guys aren't racists, it's like the Nazi thing. They could be walking around with the KKK hood and robes on. I'm like, oh, what, just because I'm walking around dressed like a member of the KKK, you assume I'm a racist? Maybe I'm just worried about, security in my neighborhood and black on black crime. Why do you assume? Like, for them, nothing is racist. Right? Because if anything is racist, that's perceived negatively. So it's really important to whitewash white men's racism and act offended on behalf of white men who are racist and said racist things and benefited from racism to perpetuate white patriarchy. So this is the agenda of Dennis Prager and his minions here.
And of course, from the left's perspective, racist is essentially Donald Trump's middle name.
Yeah, you know what he hasn't presented yet? We'll see what goes on, but any evidence that they weren't racist? Let's just take one example of when they were accused, like Nixon calling black people dogs. Why don't you refute that? What about the whole Willie Horton ad thing? Why don't you take that up and explain how that's not racist? Let's just go through entire, Trump's racist litany of various groups. And you can try to explain to me how saying a person who has parents from Mexico can't be a neutral federal judge because they're representing their heritage when their heritage is American. right? Yeah, Trump's birtherism. That is exactly racist scheisse, as you're pointing out. I'm just going to call you NS because I can't pronounce your name. There's too many vowels and not enough consonants. So NS, you got a point. Yeah, Donald Trump is a massive racist, and they're not even going to try to deny it because they can't.
To call someone a racist is a very serious charge.
Yeah, it is. And all of those guys, except for we haven't been able to find explicitly one example of George W. Bush being racist just because I don't have time, because we did 3 of your 4 guys, actually 4 of your 5 guys we've been able to knock out of the park. And they're called racists because what they did was racism. What they engaged with in was racism. What they benefit from is racism. That is why they are called racists. It's not to hurt their feelings. It's to call them out on their white supremacy.
A racist is a person who believes that one race is inherently superior or inferior to another.
Well, we actually only get, and it's not properly cited, by the way. But yeah, Nixon talked about people as dogs. Herbert Walker Bush used racist tropes to try to say black people were dangerous. Ronald Reagan used his racist dog whistles to imply that black people were lazy. All of this fed into white resentment, the idea that white taxpayer dollars were going to prop up lazy black people or unworthy, undeserving, subhuman people. And that all is racism. So yes, in every single example that we looked at, except for George W. Bush, which, again, I didn't, but for 4 of the 5 guys, and that's just because I ran out of time, 4 of the 5 guys definitely acting, speaking, drawing on ideas that other people are inferior to white people. All of those examples are racist.
It's not intelligence, character, or values that determine an individual's worth. It's his or her skin color.
Yeah, that's why they tied the welfare queen to black people and the Willie Horton to black people. That's why Republicans do this. Because the Republican Party is filled with racists who feed off of white fear and white resentment. They're not interested in fixing the problems of racism. They're interested in cementing them in order to preserve their political power. They are racists. He's not presented anything to show they're not racist yet.
To say that racism is foolish and stupid, not to mention evil, is to understate the case.
Yes, and yet these people are doing exactly those foolish, stupid, and evil things. And you're just saying that liberals called us a racist, but then not demonstrating the guys weren't racists when I can easily prove they did and benefited from racism. Gee, who should people believe? Prager or me?
But according to most Democrats, Republicans are that stupid and that evil.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, let's just do Republicans survey racism. Actually, we'll do white resentment or anxiety, something like that. Republicans are the main purveyors of identity politics. Yep. So if you actually look at Republican polling data, you're going to find Republicans, racism, most likely vote Trump. A new study confirms again that race and not economics drove the privacy standards. No, just drove former Democrats to Trump. So this is the swing voters, right? Research on Iowa counties that swung from Obama to Trump indicate the GOP success was driven more by sexism and racism, not economic anxiety. There's some racist-ass white people out there. And we're not going to fix the problem by telling them they're not racists and that their attitudes are fine. So a new study focuses on one constituency, white people in Iowa, right? So not generalizable beyond Iowa, but it's a deep insight into one place where whites switched from Obama from voting Obama to voting for Trump. And economic distress is not a significant coefficient in explaining the shift in Iowa voters from Democrat to Republican between 2008 and 16, says Ann Oberhauser and Daniel Creer and Abdi Kusau. Quote, the election outcomes do not signify a revolt amongst working class voters left behind by globalization. Rather, in 2016, the nativist narrative about taking America back and anti-immigrant sentiment became stronger forces than economic issues. So white people we have to have a ongoing conversation about racists in our midst, racists in our family, people who have been raised in a racist culture who buy into racist lies and tropes, like the welfare queen thing, like the Willie Horton ad, and it plays to the evangelical Republican base. So Republicans are racist. People who are attracted to vote for the Republican Party right now are being drawn in by racism. So that's not being mean. It's just being empirically correct.
So let's examine some conservative policies to see if they are indeed racist.
Wait. The premise of the first part of the video was that people on the left called people on the right racists. And then he looked at 5 men, you include Trump, 4 of whom we were able to easily demonstrate used, misused, and benefited from racism. Because the idea was people are racists, right? That was the accusation. People are racist. Now he's doing a sleight of hand. He's not going to look at examples of Republicans who are not racist. He's going to switch the target and selectively pick some policies. So are we talking about policies being racist? Or are we talking about people being racist? And this is the intellectual sloppiness of PragerU. They slide things in. Like, look at that video we looked at last time about God being a he. We started off with grammar, and then somehow this ridiculous notion that because the Hebrew language only had masculine and feminine, and imputed the masculine pronoun onto their God, that we also have to keep up with that. We can't use a neutral one, a neuter pronoun, even though we have one in English because of the Hebrew. That argument didn't make sense. And then the rest of the video was not about really the masculine nature of God, so much as convincing you that boys are evil monsters, and that if they don't have a powerful, authoritarian, violent male role model, all of society will collapse because they'll just run around and rape and murder and rob. And, men are uncontrollable monsters. That has nothing to do with why God has to be a he. I mean, in their like sloppy minds, the way that they just sort of connect random things together. This is how V operates too. Like, here are 2 things that I think, and they go together. Like, no, you have to make a consistent argument. So as a peer review, what I would say now if I was looking at this text is you set up people and racists as a sort of descriptor of a person, and now you've switched over to policies, and you haven't set up an argument to evaluate whether or not a policy is racist. You've only been talking about whether or not people are racists. And this is, again, F for PragerU. They're not a university, don't think clearly, they don't think rigorously, they don't make good arguments, they don't cite their sources. So, let's continue on with destroying their cover for white racists.
If they are, then the left has a valid complaint. And if they're not, then the left is lying.
Wait. So we're going to look at some policies I've cherry-picked instead of looking at examples of people on the right doing things that people on the left say are racist, like the Willie Horton ad, or the welfare queens, or quoting Nixon, calling people dogs. Let's not look at that, because that would prove her wrong. So let's cherry-pick some policies that we can manipulate. I'm just going to guess, right? I haven't seen the policy yet. I haven't watched the video. But I'm just going to guess that they're going to misrepresent policies here and cherry-pick policies in order to straw man the left. Because we know they're intellectually vapid. They're intellectually impotent.
The long-standing conservative opposition to affirmative action is a good place to start.
Hey, let's talk about voter suppression. Why aren't we talking about voter suppression as a racist policy? Because actually affirmative action was designed to address long-standing historic biases in internal selection processes, like at universities. So anyway, I'm going to ignore this because this is going to be strawmanning, and I don't have time to break all of this down. But I'm just going to point out affirmative action is not a good choice to pick to show that Republicans aren't racist, because everywhere you go, it's white men who are conservative white men and women saying that everything is fine now with racial justice, and so we don't need affirmative action anymore. But the fact is, they wouldn't know. So anyway,
it was Democratic President John F. Kennedy who in 1961 first used the term affirmative action. But affirmative action in the way we think of it now wasn't implemented until 1970, during the administration of a Republican president, Richard Nixon. The theory was that, because of historical discrimination, blacks were at a competitive disadvantage to other races and ethnicities.
It's not just black people. It's basically anyone who's non-white minority, or a non-white person. So it's not a black versus white thing. Affirmative action isn't just for black people. Affirmative action is also designed to create more opportunities for women as well, and disabled people, and others who have been traditionally marginalized. So making this a black versus white thing is, I hope he corrects that impression, because it's not.
To erase that disadvantage, standards that most blacks presumably couldn't meet had to be lowered.
That's not how affirmative action works. Sorry, that's just a lie. Of course they lie. We're talking about reconsidering, one is if all things are pretty much the same, give the opportunity to the person who traditionally would not get the opportunity. Because the white person's probably going to be just fine, because you know what? There's lots of advantages for white people, and there's lots of disadvantages. When it comes to university entrance, it was about taking into consideration other things more than just marks. So this idea that somehow the affirmative action was about creating an easier standard for black people because they're incapable of reaching white standards is itself racist. So this guy is actually pushing a racist narrative.
One can make the case that this policy had some utility when it was first put in place. But that was a long time ago.
A long time ago was the 1970s. Yeah, we've managed to fix all of the historic and institutional racism and all of the economic lag that African Americans have. Oh, no, wait, we haven't. We haven't fixed racism. So again, this is a conservative idea. Oh, we only need 30 decades of policies that we're not really going to enforce and we're going to legally challenge and try to smear. And once we've discredited affirmative action and we've pretty much made it difficult to enact it, then we're just going to say racism is, it's over now. We don't need affirmative action anymore. It's always amusing to me when white people think that they know when racism has been solved. Based on what? Based on what? You don't know? You don't know. There's a little bug in my house. But, at least it's summer, so we can have bugs.
The conservative position is that blacks have repeatedly proven they can compete with anyone without the benefits of lower standards.
But it's not... Oh, God. Oh, my God. Again, this is such a straw man. Such a straw man. It's. Of course they can. But, of course, African Americans and Black Americans, if you're not from African descent, you're from other parts of the world, it's not about your ability to compete. It's that the people who are black are disproportionately likely to end up in bad neighborhoods because of historic economic discrimination. So they have harder time accessing quality education. They have harder time accessing things that make them prepared to go, like that are advantages in the university level. They're less likely to have a college educated parent, because their parents in the 1960s couldn't, you could hardly get to use the water fountain unless it was, directed a certain way, let alone. Oh my gosh. No, so it's not about the people not being able to do the work. It's about racist people, racist white people, mostly men, but some racist white women too, constructing a society where blacks are systematically disadvantaged in education and opportunities, in, these kinds of things that allow them to get ahead. And affirmative action is a way to give people who otherwise would be assumed to be inferior and, an opportunity to compete. So again, this is just all lies. It's just Prager lies.
There are countless examples of black success in every field at every level.
Of course there is, because they are able to succeed when they are given an opportunity, and they're not, and the blocks in front of them aren't racist stumbling blocks put there by white people. And that's it. It's about getting the stumbling blocks that white people put up in front of black people out of the way. That is one of the things that affirmative action is designed to try to address. So again, he is acting as if affirmative action assumes the inferiority of black people or non-white people, when in fact, the motivation behind affirmative action is to acknowledge and restrain the racism of white people. And this is why Republicans don't like it. They don't want their racism restrained. They don't want to be able to, or they want to be in this position where they have to give somebody an opportunity that they don't want because they're bigots. We see it with the couples who want to get married and have a wedding cake. We see this kind of bigotry about letting doctors claim religious objections to treating trans patients. It's always about protecting the patriarchal dudes from having to change their world, their experience, anything in their lives. They just want to reinforce that. So this is going too long, I know, but I'm having a rant. I hope you guys enjoy it. All right, hitting play.
The policy is no longer necessary. But the
policy, if the policy was about the raw talent in the black community, it would have never been needed. Because the problem isn't black people. The problem is racist-ass white people. That's the problem. That is the problem. White people need to be restrained. Their racism needs to be restrained. That is why affirmative action exists, not to give opportunities to people who haven't earned it and don't deserve it or are somehow inferior. It's to stop the inferior white people from selecting people who look like them to keep power in the hands of racists.
Conservative argument goes further. Study after study shows that, in the case of college admissions, affirmative action hurts more blacks than it helps. By lowering admission...
Yeah, no, they didn't actually cite a study. Did you notice? They didn't actually put up a study there. They just made a claim. So
standards for blacks and some other minority students, colleges set many of these students up for failure.
Yep. Again, no citation. I don't have time to deal with this right now, but this is basically, we've seen them lie from start to finish. Yeah. Please, citation needed. These guys don't cite anything because they lie. Just like racists do.
They get placed in schools for which they are not prepared.
Yes. So he's saying that they're perfectly capable of doing stuff, except they're not perfectly capable of doing stuff. So who's making racist assumptions here? All right. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't issues for first-generation college students. There are. I was a first-generation college student. I came in a lot less prepared to structure my time and do things at the college level than my peers did, but I also had a lot of other benefits as well. And so to say that these students are struggling because they're black and not because they're first-time college students, I think is a questionable claim. I'd like to control for that. I'd like to see comparison of success rates of first-time college students who are white who are coming into these places, and then also first-time college students who are black versus college students who are black whose parents have a college degree. These are just empirical questions I would raise immediately if you wanted to try to claim that affirmative action has set only black students up for failure.
And high black dropout rates confirm this view.
Where's the data, mate? Where is the data? You're just asserting these things. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So let's see dropout rates for the last 50 years. Let's see it. Let's see if black dropout rates before the introduction of affirmative action were lower. Can we see that data, please? That would be a good comparative analysis. The effect of affirmative action on dropout rates. Let's look pre and post affirmative action. Let's look at the 1950s. See how many Republicans were eager about allowing diversity in schools back then. What were the dropout rates when there was only 1% of people able to get into college who were, black?
How could it be otherwise? If academically unprepared white students were admitted to Ivy League schools,
sorry guys, I didn't realize
they
the audio
too
was
would be
quite
set
so
up to
high
fail.
the whole time.
Conservatives believe blacks and other minorities are every bit as capable as whites of succeeding as engineers, surgeons, policemen, businessmen, lawyers, and college students.
They just don't want to do anything to actually make that happen. That's the difference. People on the left want to give people opportunity in historically racist institutions like university admissions. And Republicans want to talk a good game and then ask everyone to live by white standards. Like, yeah, you're perfectly capable of being a doctor if you behave and sound and act exactly like white men. But of course, you'll never be that, so you'll never be respected like a white man. But, you just learn to know your place. So what they believe and what they actually try to accomplish, what they say they believe, and their policies to accomplish this, I mean, you notice that he's going to pick on affirmative action here. He's going to say affirmative action is about lowering standards, and that black people are perfectly capable of doing all these things. But then how do you explain the fact that all these capable black people aren't actually realizing their potential? So what's your Republican solution for that? Do you have something to replace affirmative action that will allow for a better meritocracy? What's your Republican policy? Let's see what they have to say.
And therefore, lowering standards for blacks is unnecessary as well as insulting.
Again, he's acting as if there was just the affirmative action was only directed to help black people. And it's all kinds of classes. So, lies.
Yet for this belief, conservatives are called racist.
No, you're called racist because you defend the racist admissions policies and you're not willing to actually confront institutional racism and dismantle institutional racism. Conservatives are called racist because they hold racist views. Conservatives are called racist because they vote for racist politicians. I mean, just look at all right, Republican racist views. Timeline of Steve's racist. Hold on. Polling. The party has a racism problem. I mean, I'm saying Democrats are perfect. What? White Republicans, here we go. White Republicans think whites, blacks, and Hispanics face about the same amount of discrimination. Honestly, if you think that this is how that is, other people have it as bad as you and everything is equal, you've got no idea. So Republicans are called racist not because they think that black people can become great people. We know that's possible. The problem is the institutional racism they face and your unwillingness to do anything about the institutional racism and just blaming the individuals for being the victims of the white, generally men in power.
The irony, of course, is that those who accuse conservatives of being racist believe blacks and other minorities are not as capable as whites of succeeding.
A lie. I mean, again, this is like the lies he was telling at the beginning of the video. But that is, of course, a straw man of the left's position, as I've articulated it here. It's about the structures, allowing people to being transformed in order to allow people to participate and rise in a meritocracy. No, it's not about lowering standards. It's about opening up opportunities. And of course, they can't really paint the left correctly because then it shows what freaking racist they are.
And therefore still need affirmative action. Almost a half century after it was first implemented.
Because, we had from 1640 until, slavery for hundreds of years. And then we had Jim Crow, which was decades of basically slavery without the legal structure of slavery. But all of that, he thinks is what? Fixed from between 1970 to 2000, 30 years, fixed 3 centuries of racism? I guess it must be worth a lot of money to sell out.
Let's look at another issue where this contrast between conservatives and those who accuse them of being racist is even more starkly drawn.
So he's already lied to us about affirmative action. He's lied to us about what affirmative action is, what it's for. He's provided no data, no empirical support for any of his claims, and he's lied about progressives. So let's see what the next thing is on his plate.
Voter ID.
Oh,
Conservatives
yes.
say America should require every voter to present an ID when voting.
So we're going to go fast over this, but let's face it. Voter ID laws are unnecessary because the incident of in-person voting fraud is so small as to be negligible. And the only reason that Republicans want to enforce. Did I accidentally move this back? Let's move it forward. I don't want to sit through this crap again. The only reason why Republicans now, after hundreds of years of having fine elections, we've had valid presidential elections going all the way back to the start of the Republic. Why is it important to get voter ID now? Because voter ID is an expense. It's often an obstacle for people who might be too poor to afford the transportation, the time off work to go do the paperwork, who lack the ability. Maybe they're elderly and they've got other stuff going on with their minds. But anyway, it's an obstacle to voting, and it's not about securing elections, because we don't have a problem with elections being rigged in America. We just don't. Every attempt to find systematic in-person voter fraud has turned up nothing. And so this is merely an excuse used by Republicans, creating a crisis where there is none, to justify using taxpayer money to stop taxpayers who are citizens from voting. That's what this is.
Just as European countries do to help keep their elections honest.
I don't think you need a voter ID in Britain. You don't have to show ID at the polls. You register and you show up with your voter card. So, and the one country I know of in Europe doesn't require voter ID. So again, PragerU lies. They don't name any countries in Europe. Plus, they hate Europeans for being socialists anyway. So I don't know what this is all about.
Are all these democracies racist? Of course not. Yet
you haven't demonstrated that they use them or they provide them. And also, you've not demonstrated a need for voter ID, other than the fact that it makes it harder to vote, which is the Republican motivation.
The accusers say that conservatives who support voter ID are racist.
Yeah, because if you look at Texas, the kinds of people that they said could vote would be someone who showed up with a concealed weapons permit, and people who couldn't vote would be people who showed up with a college ID. So where they go is they require cost money. We can look at how conservatives eliminate polling places in urban areas with high amounts of non-white populations in the area. You just look at the whole, it's not just voter ID, it's a whole system. But in the case of voter ID, the people who are least likely to be able to overcome all of the legal and financial obstacles in order to secure an ID before they vote are people who are poor, who are elderly, who are students. And that includes some minority populations. But it's more than just being racist. It's about suppressing the Democratic vote overall. So just because they're trying to suppress the votes of, say, like poor white people or college students of various backgrounds, that doesn't mean that it's not racist. It just means it's racist and it's bigoted. So it can be both.
Why do they say this? Because, they argue, it's really a ruse to prevent blacks and other minorities from voting, since many of them just aren't capable of acquiring an ID.
No, it's not that they aren't capable. It's that the rules that are set up are designed to exploit their vulnerabilities in terms of economics.
Can you get more condescending than that?
All right, let's look it up. GOP voter ID laws help Trump win. Who is that? I think it was from Pennsylvania, that guy. Oh, am I on news already? These are all really recent stories, but let's go back to 2016. Don't look at the news. Wisconsin AG suggests voter ID helped Trump win the state. Republican Attorney General, this is from 2018, suggested Trump wouldn't have won Wisconsin and GOP Senator Ron Johnson wouldn't have won re-election without the state's voter ID laws. He told WISN AM radio host Vicki McKenna on Thursday that he battled in court to make sure the law was in effect for the 2016 election. How many of you listeners really honestly are sure that Senator Johnson was going to win re-election as president, or President Trump was going to win Wisconsin if we didn't have voter ID to keep Wisconsin's elections clean and honest and have integrity? Well, Scott Ross, who I know, by the way, friend, we knew each other professionally when we both worked in Madison. I consider him friendly, but not a friend. I don't wish him happy birthday. But he is the executive director of a good progressive group called Wisconsin One, the advocacy arm of a liberal research group of One Wisconsin Institute. And he said that Schimmel's remarks to McKenna were an admission that the law is rigged to help Republicans win elections. So let's see. Municipal clerks reported 73 instances of possible fraud in 2016 in a state of 5 million people. In a state where half of the people voted. So out of over 2 million votes, there were 73 instances of possible in-person voter fraud. 43 instances involved 17-year-olds who tried to vote in the April primary, so more than half of them were just overeager teenagers. 5 involved someone trying to vote twice in a primary, and 21 stemmed from the November election, including 10 reports of someone trying to vote twice. So what Republicans are saying is that we should spend literally millions of dollars forcing people to get IDs, denying people the vote if they don't have the right ID or they don't have the right signature match or whatever else, because there were 43 instances of possible fraud, half of whom were 17-year-olds wrongly thinking they could vote. Is that fiscally responsible? I still want to find that Pennsylvania guy, though. Pretty sure it was Pennsylvania. I'll try narrowing it down by putting in Pennsylvania. Can I get there just with a... Yep. Politician, PA politician, voter ID helps GOP win in state. There's this guy. See, you don't want to get in a fight with a political scientist with a good memory. There's some things I can't remember, but this stuff I remember. Pennsylvania State House Republican leader Mike, whatever how you pronounce that, said this weekend that the state's new voter ID law will allow Mitt Romney to win the state in November. Pro-Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine, it's done. Pro-life legislation, abortion regulated voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state, is done. Right? And Pennsylvania Democratic Party spokesperson told the website the Republican House Majority Leader's admission that voter ID only serves the partisan interest of his party should be shocking, but unfortunately it isn't. Democrats are focused on protecting Pennsylvanians' right to vote. You know why? Because Republicans don't care about democracy. They only care about power. All right, so we have here just proved that voter ID laws are clearly partisan in 2 important swing states. Sorry, there's a little, with bugs, there's a little fly you probably can't see. It's so tiny. He's flying around my head. I'm going to try to open up the window here to encourage him to fly out of it. I have a feeling we're going way over time. All right, we're not that far over time, but it is almost time to go. So let's wrap up this idiocy. From PragerU, the lies and propaganda of PragerU. And then we'll look at the chat a bit more and we'll wrap it up.
Let's be real. You need an ID to drive, to fly, to buy a beer.
You don't have a constitutional right to drive, or to fly, or to buy a beer. You do have a constitutional right to vote. And obstacles to that right are basically a denial of that right.
Even to purchase some cold medicines.
Yeah, because of drug dealers, that doesn't mean that you should do just because you have to buy ID to get alcohol doesn't mean we can justify using ID when it's an unnecessary expense and all it does is prevent democratic participation. This is the rationale of totalitarians who want you to be afraid of things that you shouldn't be afraid of. They thrive off of fear and lies. This guy is helping fascists. He is. He's helping promote a fascist agenda, an anti-American, anti-equality, fascist agenda for Americans. And you know what that really is? At the end of the day, it's the Christian Taliban. Dennis Prager is part of the Christian Taliban. These draconian abortion laws are Christian Taliban. Christian Sharia. I didn't say Sharia because Sharia actually has some ideas in it to protect people. This is just religious totalitarianism wrapped up in the flag because they're passing it through state legislative houses, but they might as well be passing them in the church. Because this has nothing to do with democracy. It's all about power.
Whites can do it, but blacks can't?
Again, who cares?
Tell me again who the racists are?
The racists are the people who are denying people the right to vote and denying access to education and telling them the whole time it's your fault. Or it's the fault of these people who are trying to help you. That's
One
racism.
more example. It's conservatives who push for school choice.
Yeah, because they want to privatize education so that they are the only ones who can afford decent education for their children to perpetuate the racist structure we have now. And they do some tokenism, handing out taxpayer money to marginalized kids, especially in rural and urban areas, to pay them to go to religious schools. So they're filtering taxpayer money through urban children to profit religious indoctrination. That's what they're doing. So let's just with that framework, I'm going to hit play.
Which would allow all parents, not just wealthy ones, to decide where their children attend school.
This is also part of their agenda, to eliminate public education. They want to end public education and make it a for-profit industry. And that is what school choice, which is really school privatization, is. And they are happy now to hand out some freebies to poor kids to say, look at how equal we all are. But once they destroy public education, you really think they're going to hand out money to poor kids anymore? They're just going to send their rich kids to the best schools that they can afford and leave everyone else in the dust.
Tuition vouchers, charter schools, these are conservative initiatives.
To use taxpayer money to fund religious indoctrination. He left that part out, but that's the ultimate goal. It's not to improve educational outcomes. It's to find ways of legitimately getting taxpayer money to faith institutions to indoctrinate people for the Christian Taliban.
Those on the left fight these reforms at every turn.
Yes, because we want public education that is accessible to everyone, and everyone should have a good public education as a foundation for the meritocracy we want to build. But of course, Republicans don't want a meritocracy. They want to tilt the playing field. And how do you do that? You eliminate public education, which actually gives more people opportunity, and you concentrate all of the really good quality education in the white community, in the charter schools, in the private schools, in the boarding schools, in the preparatory schools, and then you stream your kids as legacies into the Ivy schools, because you didn't deserve to get in there anyway, but your family is a legacy member, so now your unworthy kid is also a legacy member, is going to get into Yale, and they just want to keep that going. And he's defending it.
It's the left that doesn't trust minority parents to select an appropriate school for their children.
No, it's the left who thinks that this is a con job to hand taxpayer money off to religious indoctrination in a way that skirts around the separation of church and state. So just to be clear.
Why aren't the people who keep black children in failing schools the racists?
Oh, why? Because we're trying to fund public education. It's not that we're trying to keep them in failing schools. It's that we're trying to get enough resources to pay teachers what they deserve, to fund technology in the classroom, to have good science labs, to have arts programs. And who's fighting that? Who's fighting rising property taxes or transferring wealth from wealthy school districts to poor school districts? Is that Republicans? I think that's Republicans. So who are the real racists? Republicans are the real racists.
At some point, maybe you'll start asking yourself like I did, who's really obsessed with race?
Yeah, I would say the racists are definitely
the left
obsessed
or the
with
right?
race. Yeah.
And whose policies really hurt blacks?
The right. To eliminate opportunities, to eliminate public school funding, to whitewash all of the racism of Nixon and Reagan and the Bushes and Trump. Y'all really hurt. Not just black people, but all marginalized people.
Maybe it's not who you think it is.
No, it's who we think it is. It's exactly who we think it is.
I'm Derek Green of Project...
I'm really sorry, Derek. You're a sellout. You're a sellout.
21 for Prager University.
Yeah. How much did they pay you for that, Derek? How much? What did it cost for Part of Your Soul? So I don't know. What do you guys think? Was that entertaining? I mean, I haven't watched that one before, but I've certainly become more fierce and quite happy to be a more vocal ally for racial justice. I was making that kind of stupid assumption that maybe Midwest white people do, that, because I don't hold racist views, I don't feel I should talk about it so much because it's not really my thing. Actually, if you oppose racism, you need to talk about it. And talking about where white people are failing is really important, because conservatives won't do it. And someone has to. We're not going to fix things by protecting white people from, the society, the structures that we're benefiting from. So, all right. Well, you guys don't seem to have a whole lot to say. Great fun. Enjoyed my passion. Oh, that's very nice. And we're 5 minutes over time. So once again, even though I didn't properly prepare a show, somehow managed to pull it out by the end. So that's very good. It was interesting. Good. Yeah, we can keep dunking on PragerU for a while. I think this is a pretty deep well we can go back to in the second half of the show for weeks and weeks coming up, especially when I'm lazy and I don't have other things to talk about. So guys, I'm going to probably shortly set up this boring hangout waiting for the election results, because I'm going to be up and I want to see the UKIP results when they come out. So for those of you who are patrons of mine, I'll throw up a link for that in the Hangout. Steve Shives also has his patron Hangout, so maybe I can stop by that since I don't have to do my own and just, be lazy on Steve's channel. And then, of course, tomorrow night, it's Cog and Kevin and me. We'll be looking at the official results of UKIP, looking at some of the other parties in the UK as well. And apparently, so NS asks in the chat, UKIP results 0 seats. I saw the last polling done before voting started, predicted 1. And I'm happy to go with the poll prediction. So for a while it was 0, now it's 1. So I'll say they might pick up 1 seat. So we'll see if it's probably within the margin of error. It could still be 0. I could do a whole series on Prager and call it Prager FU. Oh, wait, yes, someone has already done that. Not so much. I'm kind of doing it different from Kev, so I don't feel so bad. But yes, I need to go away. All right, so see you guys maybe later, Monday night, whatever else. But thanks for watching. I've been Christy. You guys are always awesome. And I'll see you back here for another Sunday with Weekend Winters. Have a good one, you guys.